morning, brethren.
Good morning.
As Mr. Niles said, we want to revisit the Beatitudes again. So far, I think we've looked at blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers. So this morning we want to look at another one. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 5. And let's start from verse 11. It says, "Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely, for my sake." Verse 12 it says, "Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." Now the word revile in the Greek is onidizo, O-N-E-I-D-I-Z-O, and it means to defame, to taunt, to reproach, to upbraid, and to attempt to disgrace someone. The Jameson, Fawcett and Brown Bible commentary says, "It is to abuse you to your face in opposition to backbiting." So you're opposed to backbiting in this specific reference. And the response that you get is that someone or people oppose you to your face in opposition, abuse you to your face in opposition. Now they said, Christ said, for righteousness' sake. In verse 10, he said, "Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Notice also in this verse, he says that when people revile you or abuse you to your face, it says, "Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven." Now notice how Christ links many of these things to a reward in heaven. In this instance, it is not so much that if you get abused, you get a reward. But it is how you respond when you are abused. And we will see in a little bit more detail how this works out. It says, Christ said for righteousness' sake in verse 10. And here he identifies himself and his cause with that of righteousness, binding up the cause of righteousness in the world with how he would receive, with the reception of himself. And we know, as it says in Psalms 119, verse 172, it says, "All thy commandments are righteousness." So what this is suggesting to us is that when we keep the law of God, we could find ourselves being exposed to being reviled or this verbal abuse. Now if we notice something here in verse 11, it says, "Blessed are you when men shall revile you." It didn't say when the world. So the inference here is that the men or the people who can revile you can be a family. They can be friends. They could even be brethren. And one of the things that we as brethren have to guard against is being guilty of reviling one another. Because we can find that the person who revile might end up in the kingdom and you yourself being thrust out, as the Bible says. And there is also a hidden sanction to us that we ought not to engage in attempting to revile one another. Now, like I said, it is not merely because of when somebody abuses us or reviles us that we get this reward, but it's because of how we react towards it when we are reviled or abused. Let's look at Matthew chapter 27. Matthew chapter 27, and let's read from verse 38. It says, and sitting down they watched him. Then were there two thieves dealing with at the time Jesus was crucified. Then were there two thieves crucified with him, one on the right, one on the left. The one on the right hand, one on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, reviled Christ, wagging their heads and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself, if thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him, with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, yet he cannot save himself. So they're making a mock. They're taunting Christ now. And notice one of the meanings of the Greek verb to revile is to defame, to taunt, to reproach. And what we're seeing here is the chief priests and elders, they're taunting Christ. You're on the cross. Well, you said you could save people. Why don't you come down and save yourself? And no doubt they would have laughed, in a derisory manner. He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let God deliver him now. If he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. And the thieves also which were crucified with him cast the same in his teeth. The figurative slap in the face. Christ bore this. As it says, for this so they persecuted the persons, the prophets who were before. And there's not a greater prophet than Christ. And see, the taunting at the most painful time in his life is that he would have been exposed to being reviled. And later we will look at his response. That's how the Bible says, recording his response. But why, brethren, are we said, blessed are you? This is when you're exposed to being reviled. Let's go back to Matthew 5. Why are we told that we would be blessed? Let's go back to Matthew 5 and let's go from verse 43. It says, You have heard that it has been said, You shall love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, Christ is speaking here now, I am saying unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and note, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. What happens when people revile you? They abuse you. They despitefully use you. And here, this is the response. If this is your response, bless them who curse you. Do good to them who hate you. Pray for them who despitefully use you. Why? that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, that's not a big deal. What reward do you have? Don't even the publicans and do the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the publicans do that? And here's the command. Therefore, be you therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. So, if you do these things, when people revile you, bless them who curse you. That is being perfect. The natural reaction would be to revile in response. So if when that happens to you, you bless them, you do good to them, it says pray for them. Why? That you may be the children of God. And I don't need to turn to that, brethren. We've heard it. It says, now are we the children of God. So that if when we happen to face a situation like this for righteousness' sake, not because we were, in some way offensive to somebody. If that's what happened, then we brought it on ourselves. But for righteousness' sake, we're upholding the law, we're doing what is good, and this happens. And if this is the way we respond, it says, this is when we respond this way to being abused, that is when great our reward will be in heaven. Because it says, it takes perfection to do these things. The natural man will not or cannot do this. So that when we get down to responding this way, that is when perfection is being developed within us. And let's take another look at Christ's experience, and let's see how it's recorded here. 1 Peter chapter 2. Recorded for our benefit, as it says. 1 Peter chapter 2, and let's go from verse 19. Describing how Christ responded. It says, for this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience towards God, or wanting to obey the laws of God, endure grief, suffering wrongfully. Suffering wrongfully. For what glory is it, if when you be buffeted for your faults, you take it patiently? So if, as I said, we do something to be offensive to people and they revile you and you take it patiently, it's not a big deal. But hear what it says here. But when, if you do well, and you suffer for it, you take it patiently. This is acceptable with God. Not reviling in return. This, when we take that patiently. When we, blessed are you, for righteousness' sake, when men shall revile you, then as it says with the children of God, if when this happens, we take it patiently, then this is acceptable with God. For even hereunto were you called, because Christ also suffered with us, for us, leaving an example that we should follow in his steps. And they said he did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. Who, note from verse 23, who when he was reviled, when Christ was reviled, he reviled not again. And when he suffered, he threatened not. Another translation says, just forgive me here, this parallel Bible, the way the verses are put. It says, when he suffered, he did not threaten to get even. He left his cause, his case, in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. And so, brethren, we see, again, the reward at the end of the day for us responding in the manner that God would have us, as it says, for theirs we will be rewarded in the kingdom of heaven. And for finally, let's look at Paul's experience. It says, for so they persecuted the prophets. Let's look at Paul's example in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 12. Paul also experienced that. And here's what he says. Verse 10, it says, we are fools for Christ's sake, but you are wise in Christ. We are weak, but you are strong. You are honorable, but we are despised. Even unto this present hour, I'm reading the, yes, yeah. Even unto this present hour, just let me get back my space here. We both hunger and thirst and are naked, and are buffeted and have no certain place. And verse 12, and labor with our own hands, being reviled. Note again, brethren, being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we suffer it. Being defamed, we entreat. Being made as the filth of this earth, this world, and are the offscoring of all things unto this day. He said, I write not to shame you, but merely to advise you. And notice how the responses that he had. So, brethren, there's a lot more in this. But as part of the Beatitudes, Christ is telling us that these are the things that we need to be inculcating within ourselves. So that when we face this, we know how to respond, so that we can demonstrate by our responses that we are the children of God. And as it says here, if we experience these things and don't revile, the perfection of God is being manifested in us. And I hope that this is one of the things that we can aspire to.